from all of us at Bobby M's Diner from Quinsigamond Community College. We miss seeing you in person, and we have a video for you and wanted to wish you a
Happy Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving.
Hi, my name is Rebecca King, and I'm a chef instructor at Quinsigamond Community College here out of the Worcester Senior Center. So we're coming to you with our November segment, and what we've decided to do for November is we're going to do a COVID-friendly Thanksgiving. So as groups are not really encouraged for Thanksgiving gatherings, our numbers are going to probably be a little bit lighter. So what we're going to do is we're going to look into kind of how we can downsize our Thanksgiving to accommodate less people and maybe a little bit less work for people and not as much food or spending that's happened. So we're going to do a couple of quick shortcuts as to some things that we can do to kind of downsize the Thanksgiving and how alleviate the workload for you a little bit more. So one of the things that we're going to do, we're going to start off with is our turkey. So we're just going to do a hotel turkey breast. What they call a hotel turkey breast is basically the two breast pieces on the bone, and it's minus the legs and the wings on it. So it's a much more, it's much smaller portion, much more manageable portion. If you're not doing a lot of people, most people prefer the breast. If not, you can do, if you don't want to get you can get a smaller young turkey if you want the dark meat or the breast meat. And this recipe you can do for just the breast, or you can also do it for the whole turkey if you're substituting a smaller turkey as well. But we chose this one because most people like the white, and it's a much more manageable quantity. So this turkey is going to be 5.6 pounds with the bone. So this is going to feed about 4 to 5 people. The recipe we post, I think, goes all the way up to 7 pounds, and that's for 6 to 8 people. So with this one, we're going to be at about 4 to 5 people. I think it's going to be closer to our margin on this one. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my turkey, I'm going to open it up, I'm going to take it out of my netting. So it is a little bit more costly to do turkey this way, but overall you're going to have a lot less worry about leftovers and things like that. So it's kind of the cost equivalent there. And then you can get, and the cost usually increase because obviously they're not selling you the whole turkey and all the pieces. The other reason for it is they tend to be younger, smaller turkeys. So supply and demand is not as high for the younger, smaller turkeys. And this particular one is one that's raised without hormones and antibiotics in them. So it's a little bit different. But you can find them in all different varieties and brands at the store. So we're going to cut this open. I'm using a bowl because this obviously has all the juices and everything in it, and I don't want to get that everywhere. You could do it in the sink with a colander if you'd like to kind of strain that. So I'm just going to peel back this layer. Okay, so just like the full-size turkeys, they do come with the skin on them. I do have the pop-up timer in here that comes with the bigger turkeys as well. So you'll still have the ability to tell that they're done with the pop-up timer. A lot of times the hotel breasts will come with those as well. All right, so now that I've got this out of the bag and kind of ready for our preparation, I'm just going to set that aside, and then I'm going to change my gloves. I've been handling the raw turkey, so I'm going to set that aside, get my gloves changed. All right, so we're going to kind of go down our recipe and get everything kind of measured out and prepped for the turkey to get it in the oven. Okay. So the other thing we're going to do, which comes out really well for a lot of your turkeys, but especially when you're dealing with just the hotel turkey breast or just the bone-in turkey, because the breast tends to dry out pretty easily. I like to do it in a bag, so we're going to do it in the oven bag, which you can get at the store, especially this time of year. You can get the turkey-sized ones, but if you don't get the turkey-sized ones, The smaller normal oven bag should work just fine for this size turkey. The bigger bags or the turkey size bags are typically for up to 20 pounds, I believe. So you don't necessarily need the turkey bags. You can use any of the oven bags should supplement just the bone-in breast that we're doing. But just any type of oven bag like this tends to work really well. And like I said, I really like to do that when I'm using just the breast to maintain that juicy. It helps the turkey brown really well and also maintains the juices in it as well. Okay, so we're going to go to the recipe. All right, and so this is just an herb roasted turkey breast, so just a basic herb roasted turkey breast. So we've got our bone-in turkey breast, which is number one. The recipe calls for 6.5 to 7 pounds. Like I said, mine's about 5.5 pounds. And the 6.5 to 7 pounds was 6 to 8 servings. So like I said, we're going to be somewhere around 5 with our turkeys as well. All right, so we're going to need, the first thing we're going to do is olive oil. Okay, you want a pretty good olive oil. And we're going to do 2 tablespoons of olive oil to start. You could easily, olive oil is going to be the healthier option for this. Some people are traditional and they like their butter. You could easily substitute the 2 tablespoons of butter, but we're going to go a little bit healthier and do the 2 tablespoons of olive oil for this one. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is, the recipe calls for 3 cloves of garlic, but that's for the slightly bigger turkey breast, so I've downsized to 2 cloves of garlic because I know I'm going to shoot for like that 5 servings. So you can use a garlic press if you have that. Okay, the garlic press is designed to basically put your garlic in here. It's going to mince it for you. Okay, so you're going to get a nice mince, and you're just going to be left over with the skins, and then you can just get rid of that piece. All right, if you don't have a garlic press, then we can just take our knife. We're just going to cut the little end. There's a little stem end on there. I just take that stem right off. Okay, and then you can just kind of use your knife, cut it into long strips with your knife. And then from there, you can just do a small dice with your knife. And you're just going to finely chop it. You're just going to keep running your knife over it so you get that somewhat minced consistency that we have with the garlic press. Bigger is not necessarily going to hurt, so if you do it slightly bigger, it's not going to necessarily affect. It's just going to be distributed amongst your turkey breast a little bit differently. Okay. So we've got our 2 cloves of minced garlic. So we're going to set that aside over here with our 2 tablespoons of olive oil. So now we have our ingredients of our olive oil and our garlic. All right, so the next step is we're going to do 2 teaspoons of lemon juice. Now you don't have to do the lemon juice. That's up to you whether you do it. The good news is about a lot of this stuff is you can omit these ingredients without necessarily hurting your recipe. So I'm going to just take a fresh lemon here. And I'm probably only going to need like a half of this lemon. So I'm going to take that. I have a juicer here. And I'm just going to take it and I'm just going to juice this half a lemon. You could also do a, you can set this stuff there, man. Okay, so we're just going to use the juicer here. We do sometimes have a citrus press, but I'm not seeing that one here. So we're just going to use the, you could also use it by taking a spoon and kind of going in there and juicing it, or just kind of squeezing it into your cup as well. So you can take your half a lemon and squeezing it in there. So this is a citrus press. You can use this as well. All right, so you would just put your lemon in here. And you can get these at pretty much any store, kitchen store. A lot of the supermarkets and stuff have these now. So you're just going to squeeze that right in here. The beauty of the citrus press is it really gets all that pulp and everything squeezed out. You're kind of left with all your lemon, but it also typically catches the seeds, which is nice as well. So you get the holes there. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to measure this out. So we need 2 teaspoons of the lemon juice. We're going to measure out 2 teaspoons of the lemon juice. And like I said, the lemon juice is optional. If you don't want to add the lemon juice, you don't have to. It's not going to necessarily make or break the flavor of this turkey. All right, so we've got our 2 teaspoons of lemon juice. Let's see what's next on here. All right, so yet again, this one is going to be totally optional for you. We're going to do our 2 teaspoons of dry mustard. You do not have to do the dry mustard if you don't want to. It does add kind of a nice flavor to it, but it's not essential. So if you want to leave out the dry mustard, you can. So we have our 2 teaspoons of dry mustard. All right. And then next we're going to do our 1 tablespoon of fresh rosemary. So what I've done for this is I've just gotten a poultry packet. So a lot of your grocery stores have these poultry herbs, which is the thyme, rosemary, and sage, which is very common with being used in turkey and chicken. And those are the 3 herbs that are used in this recipe as well. So I'm going to go ahead and take this out, and we're going to do 1 tablespoon of rosemary in here. So rosemary is this herb that kind of looks like these pine needles. So it looks like a pine needle on a tree. So what you want to do with that is you want to just kind of pluck those leaves off. You don't want the hard stem on it, so you just want to take these petals of the rosemary. Okay. So I've got roughly 1 stalk that I've done here. So I'm going to chop that up and see how close we are to our 1 tablespoon. Okay. And you're just going to keep chopping this until you get to a nice mince, similar to your garlic consistency. So get a nice minced up. Just don't want any really big pieces. So however you get it where it's somewhat finely chopped, that's what we're aiming for. Now if you can't find the fresh stuff, there is a brand that comes in a bottle that's called Lighthouse that's typically in the refrigerator section of your store. And they do have a, it is a freeze-dried version of the herbs, and they have a poultry blend that has these same herbs in them. So you can certainly use that, and there's typically directions for that. Okay, so I pretty much have my 1 tablespoon of rosemary, and so I'm going to put that in here. Do that into my bowl. All right, so next up we have our 1 tablespoon of sage. Okay, so the fresh sage are these kind of these furry, fuzzy leaves. They're lighter in color. They look like they have a kind of a fuzz on them. Oh, thanks, Matt. Okay, so the Lighthouse looks like this. They come in these little jars. They're typically in the refrigerated section, even though they're freeze-dried. But they are in the refrigerator section of most of the supermarkets. And like I said, they're freeze-dried, and there's typically directions on the back. I usually just add them right to my mixture as I would the fresh. All right. Okay, so we need the 1 tablespoon. So I'm going to take a couple of these. These are much bigger than the rosemary leaves. So I'm just going to take a couple of these leaves here. And we're just going to start chopping these to get us to our 1 tablespoon. The sage leaves are nice. They pluck off there real easy. They're real easy to kind of chop up. You don't have the stems like you do with some of the other herbs. All right. Let's see how much I got here. Okay, so that ended up being about four or five leaves, depending on the size. Got me to my 1 tablespoon. I'm going to add those right here to my thyme, or to my rosemary. So the next thing we're going to use is we're going to do our thyme, and it's going to be 1 teaspoon of thyme. Thyme tends to be smaller, and some people consider it a little bit more flavor intense, although the rosemary is pretty strong as well. So it's a matter of preference of what you like. You can always go heavier or lighter, any of these herbs, whatever you decide to do. So the way that the thyme works is you just kind of pull the little teeny leaves, has these little leaves on it, and you're just going to kind of pull them off the stem. We're going to do that till we get to 1 teaspoon. If you don't get all the stems off, they could be easily chopped in there. The stems are fully edible. A lot of times it's just not a desired texture for people, so that's why we often don't use the stems, but they are fully edible. They just sometimes can be a little chewy for people, so that's why we try to either chop them up pretty fine or we just take them off entirely. Okay, so I'm just going to continue to keep plucking off these thyme leaves until I get myself to 1 teaspoon. And like I said, if you're really worried about those, possibly getting any of those stems mixed in there, that's where we can just take our knife and you can just run that over this as well. And that'll alleviate any concerns on whether or not you have any of those stems mixed in. And don't be afraid to shortcut. Like I said, if you find the freeze-dried stuff in that Lighthouse variety or anything like that, go ahead and use them. If you want to substitute dry, the ratio for dry to fresh is typically half of the dried of what the fresh would call for. So in this case, if you were to substitute dried rosemary, you would use 1.5 teaspoons of dried rosemary and 1.5 teaspoons of the dried sage, and then you would use 1/2 teaspoon of the thyme. Okay, so usually because the dried, once you dry it, the flavor intensifies, so you use half the mixture. So if you want to substitute dried for this, the freeze-dried I tend to go closer to a 1:1, but the dried I usually go with half. So if you're going to substitute a fully dry herb, then go with half of that. In this case, it would be 1.5 teaspoons of rosemary, 1.5 teaspoons of sage, and 1/2 teaspoon of the thyme. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of these thyme leaves and stems here. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to measure out is our salt, and she's got 1.5 teaspoons. Okay, so yet again, we're going with this being a slightly smaller turkey, so I'm only going to do 1 teaspoon of salt. Yet again, based on your salt intake, which you're allowed to have, you can obviously go a little bit lighter on the salt if you like, or with this alternative salt. This is just a kosher salt that I'm using. You can use sea salt or kosher salt. Either one would be good with this. Okay, and then I need 1/2 teaspoon of ground pepper. So I'm going to go with 1/4 teaspoon here because, like I said, we're going with a slightly smaller turkey breast. So I'm going to go with the 1/2 teaspoon for now. If I feel like I need to do more, you can always add more to that. All right, so our last ingredient is the 3/4 cup of dry wine. I have here this is just a non-alcoholic Chardonnay. You can get these at pretty much any liquor store, even some of the grocery stores will have this. So this is alcohol-free, so I'm going to get the taste and flavor of the cooking wine without the alcohol, so if that's something that concerns you. You can also get cooking wines in the store that are usually in the vinegar and oil aisle, or you can use something like this, or you can just use regular wine. But I'm going to use this non-alcoholic Chardonnay. And yet again, if you want to omit the wine altogether, you can omit the wine altogether. Okay, that's really a choice. Any of these things are not deal breakers. You can add them however you want. Okay, so we're going to look at how we're going to put this together in our recipe. So in a small bowl, we're going to combine the olive oil, garlic, lemon juice, the rosemary, sage, the salt, and the pepper. All right, so I'm going to take this bowl that I have right here. So I've got my salt, pepper in here already. We've got our olive oil. We're going to add our herbs. We're going to add our, oops, not this pepper. We're going to add our garlic. We're going to add our mustard. Olive oil, garlic, lemon juice. Our lemon juice is going to go in there. So pretty much it's going to be everything but the wine. Okay, so all the ingredients that we had besides the wine are going to be in here. So I'm just going to go ahead and stir this up. It's going to make almost like a paste that we're going to use here. Okay, so you can see it's kind of thick. It's going to be a coarse mixture, a little bit of liquid from that lemon juice and olive oil. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to prepare my bag to get it ready for my turkey. Okay, so there's usually a logical seam with this bag, so I'm going to take this seam and I'm going to put it down. I'm going to put it down in here. Okay, you want to lay it over the top of your pan here. I'm going to move this in the way so you can see. All right, so you want to have this seam side. The seam side is going to go towards the edge of your pan. I'm going to have my open side. I tend to put it down. You can use any type of roasting pan. I just have a round like Dutch oven pan here. You could do it in a rectangular pan, whatever you have available. I personally like one that has slightly higher sides like this, so I'm going to do it in here for this. So the next thing that we're going to do is I just need to take this. All right. So whenever you're using the bags, you always want to make sure you put some flour in the bottom of the bags. It's on the directions on the box, and this one is going to be a tablespoon. There's also a really nice chart in the box of bags too that has the different kinds of meats, which is nice. So it will tell you in here if you've got pork, if you've got turkey. It's going to tell you in here based on the size. It's going to give recommended cooking times, oven temperatures, how much flour you need to put in there. So those all come in this direction packet along with your twist ties that you're going to tie your package. So if you go here and they start talking about the twist ties, you don't see them. They're always in this little pamphlet in your oven box. Okay, so I've got my 1 tablespoon of flour because I know that's what I need for here. All right, so I like to do all my mixing and seasoning and everything of my turkey in my bag. It makes it a whole lot easier to maneuver. So I'm going to put my turkey in here. And then what I usually do is I actually just take my bag and I just roll it down over the top a little bit. So then I can work with my turkey. So I'm not trying to do it on the surface and then transfer it over. Okay, so what you can do now when you have your mixture is we're just going to kind of rub it in here. So depending on your preference, you can actually just lift up the skin a little bit. Some people like to really condition the meat inside, and you can do that by just lifting the skin a little bit. All right, so we can just kind of put that mixture there. You can rub this in under the skin. All right, you do the same thing for the other side here. Got my exposed turkey breast. You take my mixture, put it right on there. You rub it right in there. Put my skin back down over my breast. All right, and then you can just take the rest of this mixture. And we're just going to massage and rub this mixture right in to our turkey breast to get that flavor going. Okay, so I have my oven preheated at 325, and that's what this recipe calls for. So as you guys looked at the recipe, which is going to be posted, you're going to have your oven set at 325. And so once you kind of get this rubbed all in here, then we're going to prep our bag. So I'm going to change out my gloves. I'm going to wash my hands because I've been rubbing on that turkey. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get my bag ready for the oven. Okay, so once we have our seasonings and our flour in the bottom, we're going to take the bag. I usually like to get most of the excess air out of it. You don't have to go crazy if you want most of it. It is going to kind of rise and puff up as you cook with it. Twist the end a little bit so your bag is fairly secured together. Then you take your twist tie. You're going to feed it right through. Tighten it down much like you would a zip tie. You tighten it right down at the end here. You're going to hold it closed. So what I do now is I actually just take this end of the bag and you're going to just tuck it right down into your pot. So then you just have your bag and your turkey here. Now, you'll see the directions on the box as well. You're just going to take a pair of scissors or a really sharp knife and you're going to cut like 2 to 3 slits right in the top. So that's going to allow the steam to escape. But you'll still find that when you go to put this in the oven, you're still going to have your bags kind of puff up a little bit. So just you want to have a little bit of space in your ovens for your shelves that if this puffs up, that you can have it in there. So now our turkey is ready to go in the oven. The important thing is that the flour is in there. We've got it seasoned. Okay, we zip tied it with our twist tie, and then now we've got our holes cut into the slits at the top to let our steam escape, let some of that heat in, get nice browning on our turkey. So I'm going to get on my oven, make sure it's all set to accommodate this. I'm going to have to move a rack here, give myself some space. The good news about doing a turkey like this, too, it doesn't take as much time and space up in your oven. Okay. So I've got my 325 oven. I'm just going to check the timing on this. It's obviously going to be less time. So this says 1.5 to 1 3/4 hours. That's for the slightly bigger one. So I'm going to go ahead and go with about an hour and see where we are with that. Remember, we've got the popper on there, so it's going to pop when it's done. So if it doesn't look like it's done, or if you have a thermometer of your own and it's not registering 165 and that popper's not popped, then we'll put it in. At that point, I'll put it in for like 10-minute intervals, and then we'll check them every 10 minutes until the popper is popped, or we're temping at 165 degrees for the turkey. Oh, you know what? I didn't add the wine. Hold on. I didn't add the wine. Just realized I didn't add the wine. So I'm going to take that out. This is the other good news about having the slit in the turkey. So I'm going to be able to just pour that wine right in to our bag. The other beauty of doing the oven bags is it kind of takes that pesky basting of the turkey out of the way too, so we don't have to continually take it out and baste it. All right, so our wine's been added, so now we're good. We're going to check it in an hour. Either check it with the thermometer, or we're going to check and see if our popper is popped. Okay, so now that we've got our turkey kind of going and it's in the oven and it's baking, we're going to do our next step, which is our squash. So I'm going to show you a slightly different way to do squash. This is a way that I've been prepping squash for years now, and it's a little bit healthier than traditional boiled squash because it doesn't have all the sugar and everything in it, and by roasting it, it actually ends up coming out a little bit sweet, but without all the sugar. So it's kind of more of the natural sugars that come out in the squash, and it's very flavorful. And since I started actually making the squash roasted for my family and my in-laws, they've actually got away from the boiled squash altogether and prefer the roasted. Okay, so the recipe that we have, which will be posted, is calling for the squash, so peeled and seeded. So I just bought this at the store, so quick, easy thing. If you only have regular squash, that's fine. So you would just peel the whole squash, seed it out, cut it in half. Or you can get one like this that is already peeled and already seeded. So either way, so whether you're doing it from fresh, where you're actually peeling it and seeding it yourself, or whether you're doing this. Now this is roughly half a squash. The recipe calls for 1 3-pound whole squash, and of course that's going to be without the, that's going to include the weight of the skin and the seeds. So you'll end up with just shy of 3 pounds after you seed it and take the skin off. So this one actually weighed up, I weighed it on my scale, it weighed up at 1.5 pounds, which, so we're going to do the recipe by half for this one. So depending on how many people you're feeding. So this piece of squash is going to get you maybe 3 to 4 servings, maybe 5 if you don't have big veggie eaters. But you're going to get at least 3 to 4 servings out of this. So if you were to do the whole squash or do 2 of these halves and do the recipe as a whole, then you're going to get closer to that 6 to 7 servings of squash, maybe even 8, depending on the size of the squash and the amount of veggie eaters that you have. Okay, so I'm going to take the squash, I'm going to cut it. We're going to do it kind of into, I like to do it into strips or like a slice. The slices are going to be about a 1-inch thick. Okay? And then when you get done with those slices, so if you have these pieces that look like kind of like a half moon slice, I'm just going to cut them into a large dice. Just kind of work your way around that half moon. And this is about the size piece that I'm going to do, which is about a 1.5-inch dice. I'm going to put them on our tray over here. So when you're roasting, you can do this with a piece of parchment paper, or you can do it with foil. So the foil actually works really well with roasting. Roasting kind of caramelizes the natural sugars and things in your vegetables. So it can kind of make a really sticky, cooked on mess. So the foil actually helps with the browning in the roasting process, but also makes for a much easier cleanup. If you're worried about sticking or anything additional, you can actually just take some cooking spray and you can spray down your foil, and that'll help further with your product sticking. You could even take, if you didn't want to use cooking spray, you could take a little bit of butter, like a stick of butter, and just rub it on there, or you can just take some olive oil and brush it on there. Either way, don't have to go crazy with it, just kind of spray it down lightly, and that'll help with the product sticking. Okay, so we're just going to continue to work our way around these slices. Got another half moon one. We'll get that on our tray. Ooh, you get a squeaky noise. Okay, it is a squeak. So this one's a little bit thicker, so I'm going to cut this into smaller pieces. And you want to keep your pieces fairly uniform in size. So just pick a size you like. You don't want it too small that they're going to get too hard and too well done. But you don't want it so big that it's going to take too long to cook. So that's why that 1.5-inch dice is good. But by keeping the pieces consistent in size, it's going to cook more evenly. So you won't have some pieces that are done and some pieces that are still hard. Okay? So we're going to continue to cut these into those cubes. So these, when you get to these kind of slices, these half of a full moon kind of slice, not that crescent moon, you're just going to keep, I cut those in half and then do my dice. So take this piece and I cut it in half, so we end up with the 2 strips like this. And then I'm going to cut each one of those strips into my dice. And we're just going to keep doing this until we get all of that squash done. Okay, I'm nearing my last piece here. All right, so you want these spread out that they're a thin layer on your sheet, okay? And you can kind of check the pieces if you see any big ones that you have on there. You can just cut them in half further, make them a little smaller. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to measure out our ingredients for the remainder. So the full recipe calls for 3 tablespoons of olive oil. Now, I'm only going to do 1.5 tablespoons because remember, I'm only doing the 1.5 pounds. So it's roughly a tablespoon per pound of olive oil if we go by the recipe. So I'm going to do my 1.5 tablespoons of olive oil. And the olive oil is really just going to lightly flavor the squash. It's also going to help it brown, and it's also going to keep it from kind of sticking on there too. It actually adheres the seasonings as well. So I called for 1 teaspoon of kosher salt. 2 teaspoons of kosher salt. So I'm just going to do the 1 because I've only got half the recipe here with the 1.5 pounds. So just kind of sprinkle that fairly evenly over our squash. And then our pepper is 1 teaspoon. So I'm going to do just a half a teaspoon of that as well. Actually, the salt is... I just realized I only did a half a teaspoon of salt, so I'm going to do another half a teaspoon of salt. All right, so in total, we did 1.5 tablespoons of the olive oil. We did 1 teaspoon of the kosher salt or sea salt. And then I did a half a teaspoon of black pepper. So if you have the full butternut squash or you have 2 halves, you're going to do the full recipe. For the 1 half like I did, which is about the 3 to 4 servings, we're going to do just the 1.5 tablespoons of oil, 1 teaspoon of salt, and a half a teaspoon of pepper. So you can use a spoon, a spatula, whatever you want. I've got the gloves on. I like to kind of just toss it with my hands and get all the oil kind of coated on there. If you like, you can actually add a fresh herb of your choice. You can do, I actually like to do thyme a lot of times on my squash. So if you have any thyme left from your turkey, you can actually add some of the fresh thyme to that. You can either do it as a sprig that you roast, or you can just pull some of those flowers off your squash, off your stems here, and kind of put it into your squash. You can use dried. You just want to just lightly toss some dried thyme on there, you can, or whatever herb that you would like. I've seen it done with marjoram. You could use thyme. You could use a little bit of rosemary if you want. It's really just a matter of preference. You can do it with just the salt and pepper and olive oil, or you can add some herbs, which adds a little bit of color, will add a little bit of flavor. I'm going to add a little bit of thyme because that's what I usually add to mine. So the herbs are totally optional, and if you have them left over from the turkey, use them. It's up to you. Okay, another quick toss with the herbs. All right, and then we're going to roast this in the oven. So typically the ovens for roasting are usually a little bit higher. So this one calls for a 400-degree oven. If you don't have the oven space, I have done my squash with my meat. So you could do it in with your meat. You would just have to do it a little bit longer. And then you can always finish it off at the high heat after you take your meat out. So however that works, sometimes I'll do it with my, like a roast pork or something like that. I'll do it at the 350 for 20 minutes or so. And then I'll take the meat out, and then I'll actually add the higher heat to it for the last 5 or 10 minutes. But for this one, if you're doing the recipe full on, 400-degree oven. So I have if you don't have a second oven, like I said, you could do, you can add it in with your turkey and just throw the high heat on it afterwards. Okay, so this is going 400 degrees for 25 to 30 minutes. So we're going to go ahead and set the timer on that. And that is just a simple roasted squash. Like I said, you're going to be really amazed when this comes out. It's going to have a really nice color to it. It's actually going to be a little bit softer, but not as mushy as it would be if you kind of steam the squash. And then it's going to have a little bit sweet flavor to it without adding any sugar, which is certainly a healthy option. Okay? Okay, so now that we have our turkey roasting and we've got our squash in, I'm just going to show you a kind of a quick and easy stuffing that is not super labor intensive, that you can do better in smaller quantities if you don't want to have a lot. So it's just a quick like stovetop method. So you can just use a stovetop turkey stuffing. So I use this as kind of a quick sheet at home. It's not going to make a ton for you. And if you don't have a lot of time to kind of chop up all the vegetables and everything, and of course these mixes come with all the seasoning, and it comes with the onions and the celery and everything kind of in there as well that reconstitutes when you cook it. All right, so we're just going to follow the directions on the box, which is going to call for a cup and a half of water and 4 tablespoons of butter. So of course you've got your stick of butter. A full stick of butter is 8 tablespoons. So 4 tablespoons is going to be a half a stick. So I'm going to take it and you're going to mark 4 tablespoons in. So we're going to cut that block right in half, and we've got our half a stick of butter. All right. And then I also do a can of whole berry cranberry sauce. Okay, so this is going to be the whole berry cranberry sauce. So I'm going to make this a quick, easy cranberry pecan stuffing, which is a very moist and flavorful stuffing that is going to be a little bit different with a lot less of the work for you. Okay, so we've got our cup and a half of water right here. I've got my 4 tablespoons of butter right here, and then I've got my stuffing mix ready to go. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put our burner on like medium heat, which is about 4 or 5 on your stove. Because we're going to want to bring our water to a boil. We're going to do our cup and a half of water. We're going to go ahead and throw our 4 tablespoons of butter to melt down there with our water as it comes to a boil. So that's just going to take a couple minutes. So while that's happening, you should have your whole berry cranberry sauce opened. And then I'm going to take some, if you don't have any nut sensitivities, I'm going to add a little pecans in here. So it's going to end up being a cranberry pecan stuffing. Yet again, this is something that I've made for years. And I've done it with cutting up the onions and the celery and all that stuff and adding it to my own breadcrumbs or a regular dry stuffing mix with stock and all those things like that. But I found it actually sometimes goes over just as well if I do the quick cheat like this on an everyday night with some pork chops or chicken. But like I said, if you want to do a COVID-friendly, cut down your quantities, cut down your costs, you can be amazed at how much this box can stretch out and still be a little flavorful. Okay, so I have a nut grinder here that I'm going to use, but you can just chop these up with a knife if you want to. So I'm just going to load some pecans in this chute. We're just going to do a little coarse chop. What I like to do is I'm going to do some finer cut ones with the nut grinder inside my stuffing, and then I might just rough chop a few to go on top of my stuffing, just to add a little bit of garnish and texture to it as well. So with the nut grinder, I'm just grinding these up. What it does is that you feed the nuts into the top, and then it grinds the nuts in the bottom, and it'll actually measure the nuts for you too. All right. And it's just all going to be a matter of preference on how much of this you use. So this I ended up with about 1/3 of a cup of pecans, and I think that's going to be pretty good. And then I'm just going to take, you can use walnuts too, walnuts or pecans, whatever you have on hand, or whatever your preference is. So I'm going to take probably about 5 or 6 of these pecans, and I'm just going to do a rough chop on them so I can kind of use this as my garnish. for my stuffing. Sometimes when you're biting into them, they're a little bit better, a little finer ground into our stuffing itself. Okay, so this just unscrews. So I have my nice ground pecans in there. So now we're just waiting for our water and our butter to come to a boil. And like I said, stovetop, especially this year, this time of year, will come out with the turkey flavor. Other times of the year, you might only find chicken, pork, in, savory or an herbed one. But you'll usually find the turkey ones this time of year, right around Thanksgiving. They're pretty prevalent. So we're doing the turkey one. We had our 1.5 cups of water, our 4 tablespoons of butter, which is already in our pot. And then we're going to have our pecans. Like I said, I have some that I have finer chopped to go into my stuffing. And then I've got a few rough chopped ones I'm going to add to the top. Okay, so our cranberry sauce, our whole berry cranberry sauce. What we're going to do with that is we're actually going to do, we're going to add that to our water and our butter when it comes to a boil. And so when we add the whole berry cranberry sauce to it, what's going to happen is the cranberry sauce is going to break down and it's going to add into the liquid, which is going to add additional moisture to your stuffing. So this stuffing actually ends up being a really nice flavor to it, and it's usually a very moist stuffing in the end. Okay, so I'm going to pop up my heat just a little bit because I'm just about to a boil. And then got my spatula here. So I'm just starting to come to a really good simmer, so I'm going to get my cranberry sauce and I'm going to take it over. And you want to leave it at the temperature you have it at when you add your cranberry sauce, and for quite a while after adding it, until that cranberry sauce is nice and dissolved. So what you're looking for here is that the cranberry sauce dissolves into the liquid and the butter mixture. And you're really just going to be left with kind of a reddish pink liquid with the visible berries. Okay, so you really want that jelly portion to dissolve into the stuffing, so you get all that really nice cranberry flavor distributed throughout our stuffing. I'm going to switch over to a wooden spoon. No, you get a skinnier one? Yeah. So I like to get like a wooden spoon or a spatula like this to kind of help break up that cranberry sauce. Get those big chunks, it'll help dissolve it a little bit faster. Now, if you don't want quite as much cranberry flavor as this, you could just add some craisins, some dried cranberries if you want to it. You don't get as much of the cranberry flavoring to it, but you do get that little pop of cranberry. I don't find that it comes out as moist as it does with this method, but that's certainly an option too, that if you wanted to add some dried cranberries. But add the dried cranberries right to the hot liquid, because it's going to plump up those cranberries really nice, and it's going to be a better texture for your stuffing. So it's going to be more like using some real fresh cranberries in there. Real fresh cranberries you can do, but they tend to be kind of tart and bitter, which doesn't lend to as much balanced flavor as you would see with using the cranberry sauce like this or the dried craisins. Okay, so you can see my liquid is starting to get a nice kind of ruby red, dark purple color. All right, just going to keep breaking that up. Give it a stir. It usually takes about 5 minutes total for you to get all that jelly of the cranberry sauce kind of distributed through there. So you kind of just keep dissolving it down until we're left with that nice, vibrant purple, and you just got those berries floating in there. Just continue to bust up those big pieces or break apart those big pieces as you see them. So I'm just about there. Ooh, double the timers. Both of them at once. All right, so that's our timer for our turkey. So I'm going to give our turkey a check. So this one's been in for about an hour and 15 minutes. All right. I'm going to take a peek. I'm going to find my, see if my popper has popped yet. And it has. So my popper has popped. So therefore, my turkey is done. And I have a nice, moist turkey here, lightly browned. Okay. So that was about an hour and 15, hour and 20 minutes on that one. So now we're going to check our squash, which has gone off too. All right. And our squash has, so what we're looking for the squash is we're looking to check the tenderness, and usually a nice sharp paring knife or a fork you can use to pierce it. And what you want to do is you want to pick it up, and if that piece is done, it should come right off the knife, and this one's not. I'm having to kind of jiggle it off. All right, so that means this is going to be another few minutes. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to give it a nice little stir with the spatula. Just kind of stir them around. And then we're going to throw them in. They're pretty close though, so I'm just going to do these for like another 5 minutes or so. We'll give them a check. All right, so that should be pretty close. So at this point, our mixture is nice and bubbly. So I'm going to actually take this mixture and I'm going to take it off the heat, just like any other stuffing, or just like the directions. You want to take it off the heat, and then we're going to stir in our stuffing mix. And of course, when you do the stovetop like this, stuffing mix that has the dehydrated onions and celery already done in there for you, as well as the seasoning packet. Get a cover. I want to get a cover. So we're going to mix that up really good. You're going to have this nice color, that nice deep purple color. Don't worry, it's not going to stay like that, so you're not going to alienate people who come by and say, oh, what's the color on that? Actually, as it plumps up and sits, it actually lightens up in color. So I'm going to add those pecans to my mixture. I'm just going to fold those in to my stuffing mixture. You'll start to see some of those nice plump cranberries in there too. So once you get your pecans kind of mixed in there pretty good. Nope, that's fine. We're just going to set a cover over the top of it. And we're going to set it aside, just like any other stuffing. You want to just kind of, there we go. You're going to set it and cover it, typically about 5 minutes. I'm going to set another timer here for 5 minutes. And our stuffing's going to sit, and then we'll finish that off. All right, so the next phase is we've got our turkey done. It's been sitting for a couple minutes. So I'm going to take it right out of take my bag, and I'm going to transfer it right over onto my board. I like to put a sheet pan underneath it. You can maybe use a cookie sheet at home. Anything that you've got to kind of underline your cutting board is usually a good thing. We are going to have some liquid left in here. So kind of the beauty of the bag is you can kind of contain that. And I'm going to add that right back into my pot here. All right. Actually, you know what, Matt? I will take a strainer, I think, for that. I will take a strainer. It's fine mesh. All right. So we're just going to let our turkey kind of sit here. You can see my poppers pop there. So we're going to let that sit there. And then we're going to work on our gravy. So I'm going to put my burner on for our quick gravy. All right, so yet again, if you're looking to do quick and easy and not a lot of fuss and a nice flavorful gravy, I usually can cheat. So a good cheat that you can do is that you can get your get a gravy packet, much like this. So this is just a McCormick gravy packet. And we're going to take that. We're going to open that up. Typically, you're going to need 1 packet of gravy, to 1 cup of water, according to the directions. So I'm going to take my 1 cup of water, and I'm going to put it on my heat. Yet again, you want to start off with like medium heat. And then you're going to add your gravy packet, or you can add your gravy packet and whisk your water in, whichever way. I find sometimes it's you want to make sure you add the gravy packet when it's cold, though. So you want to either add the gravy packet and whisk in your cold water, or you want to add your water and then whisk your gravy in right away. I like to add my gravy second because sometimes when you use the gravy packets, like it sticks to the bottom of the pan, and then you end up with kind of the lumps and clumps of the mixture at the bottom that doesn't mix really well. So I usually just add the water like right away and do it that way. Okay, so you're going to see that we're going to start to come to a simmer pretty much right away if you have it over a nice medium heat. I like to whisk the water in the gravy packet pretty well before I do anything else to it. You can turn down your heat as you need to if it's really starting to bubble and boil. Don't worry if it's looking a little thick. That's the beauty of kind of doing this cheat, is that we're going to add all those really nice drippings from our turkey to it. What makes this is a really nice cheat is you don't have to do, it's sometimes, it has a little bit more sodium in it, but it doesn't have as much fat in it as if you would if you were using a roux, which is the butter flour mixture to thicken our gravy. So we're going to just do the packet in the water, and then we're going to add those really nice drippings to it. So once you kind of get your, at a nice, really good simmer, or it starts bubbling up pretty good, you're going to turn it down to low so we can get a nice simmer happening. And you're going to keep stirring this till you get all those kind of lumps and bumps from the mix mixed in with the water. You get a nice consistency. Just keep adjusting your heat as you need to. If it starts to really boil up on you, just keep reducing the heat so it stays at a nice simmer. Okay, so I'm about at the point now where our gravy mix is mixed in pretty thoroughly with my water. So I'm going to turn my heat down to where it's just at that nice light simmer. I'm just going to take a fine mesh strainer, and I'm just going to take my drippings. I'm going to pour it right over my gravy. Just because where I had it in the bag, sometimes you do have some residual lumps from the flour that was in your bag that was our turkey. And sometimes you'll have like chunks of the turkey residue and things like that. So I'm going to go ahead and whisk that in. It may seem a little thin at first, but if you kind of just keep this at a nice simmer, the thickness of this is going to balance out. If you like it on the thinner side, then this will work. I would just let it cook for a couple minutes and incorporate those drippings with the gravy. If not, like I said, just kind of keep it on simmer and let it reduce down and simmer a little bit, and you'll get back to that slightly thicker consistency. So like I said, what makes this easy, is that you really just have the 2 steps. You just do the packet, and then you just whisk those drippings in there. So you get those nice flavorful bits from the turkey and all those seasonings that we put in there and those herbs without all the work of adding all the cornstarch, adding a roux, or anything like that to it. It also gives you a very manageable quantity if you're doing the downsized Thanksgiving. Okay, we're going to end up with probably about a cup and a half or so of liquid, depending on how much drippage. Cup and a half, cup and 3/4 is going to be our liquid when we're done. So I'm just going to continue to let that kind of simmer there while we finish off our stuffing and our turkey. Okay, so our stuffing's been sitting for our it's been sitting there for at least our 5 minutes. So I'm going to give this a quick stir. So you're going to see that this stuffing is pretty moist, which is what makes this one really good. So you can just serve it kind of as is like that, or you can put it in the oven. Some people like that really kind of crusty. Don't be afraid because this is a stovetop one that you can't put this one in the oven. So I'm just going to take my container, and then you can just pop it right in the oven. We have our garnished pecans, and we can pop that in the oven and actually cook that a little bit further. Okay? So I'm going to do so if you have a pan like mine that's got these plastic handles on it, I'm just going to cover those with some foil, and then I'll be able to put those in to my oven for a few minutes. Okay? Or you can just use an oven-safe pot or bowl or a casserole dish. And you can bake it however you like. So whatever doneness you like. If you like it, like I said, really moist like that, you can leave it like that. If you want to put it in the oven for a little while and kind of crispy and crunchy it up, if that's how you like it, so just put it in there for the desired amount of time that you want. Okay, so as we talked about before, we have the hotel turkey breast. Oh, actually, yes. That's telling me I need my squash. So my squash timer went off. So we're going to check that squash and see if it's done. All right. Still a little crunchy. So I'm going to try and I'm finger testing it, and actually finger testing it, it's feeling like the consistency I like. So I'm just going to leave the squash for now and let that sit and cool for a couple minutes. So while we're doing that, we're going to do our turkey. I'm going to take that little pop-a-topper timer off of there. All right. And then we're going to take just a, short, this is a boning knife. You can use any type of short utility knife like that. I usually like to turn it to where I have the fat side of my breast backwards, and I have the skinny point or tip facing towards me. And I'm just going to take that boning knife or that utility knife. We're just going to find that breastbone, and we're just going to go right down that breastbone in the front, just to where we're kind of skirting it. You just want to kind of keep peeling that breast off that bone, starting at the top. And you're just going to kind of keep peeling that away. All right. And then you can turn it around to where you're at kind of that back side. You can just take your knife and keep going it down into our breast. Just kind of keep pulling it away from. Just taking the tip of that knife and keep pulling it away from our bone. Okay, so we're left with our bone here, and then we have our nice turkey segment here. Okay, typically your turkey tenderloin has this little bit of a this tendon right here. I usually just trim that right off. And then you've got this other back side of the breast. Sometimes it doesn't slice real nice, so we can just take that, we can just slice that right off too. So we should be left with a nice intact breast. For presentation, if you want to leave the skin on, you can leave the skin on. Some people like that. We're just going to take it, and we're going to just take our nice slicing knife. We're just going to do some nice thin slices of the turkey. And you get a nice turkey breast. There you go. And that is how you do the hotel turkey. So I'm just going to give my gravy a check. I'm reducing down some. All right. So I'm going to take my, just use this measuring cup as my gravy boat. And like I said, just like the stuffing, you can kind of just continue to cook the gravy till it's the thickness that you want. The longer you cook it, the thicker it's going to be. Should put this right up here. All right. So we've got our nice thin sliced turkey. We've got our gravy, our shortcut gravy. We've got our nice roasted squash and our stuffing. All right, and so now we have our nice cranberry pecan stuffing, we've got our squash, and we've got our nice roasted turkey here. And that is your easy, COVID-friendly Thanksgiving.